Okay. Our next speaker is Dr. Vernon Scruton. As Michael had mentioned before, a very well-known international speaker. He graduated from Cambridge University and later pursued an academic career in philosophy, both in Cambridge and in London. And it wasn't all about academia. He also took a year's leave to set up an educational charity in Czechoslovakia during its final years of communism. He has written over 30 books, and his most recent include Culture Counts, Faith and Healing in a World Besieged, and A Political Philosophy, both of which respond to the development and decline of Western civilization. His academic research has taken great interest in the area of aesthetics. He currently holds teaching positions in Oxford University, where he is also a Fellow of Blackfriars Hall, the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and is a Senior Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Centre in Washington, DC. So one of Britain's leading intellectuals, I'm sure we're all eager to hear what he has to say to us about pop music's impact on language, culture and sex. Please welcome Dr. Scruton.
Well, I've responded to the call to talk to you about pop music, but it's been part of my life's study to avoid it. So I won't talk with any authority, but I want to talk about some more general questions about what music and art in general means to us and why we have to make judgments about these things. Dr. Mullins has just said some very interesting things which I'm sure have already predisposed you to the thought that not everything that we do in our spare time is actually good for us. And in particular, there are forms of what we now call entertainment which might be very far from the virtuous forms of distraction that he would recommend. So I want to say how we might begin to think about this question in the context of pop music. Music has been important in every civilization, obviously. It seems to be a natural part of the human condition and part of our ways of relating to each other socially. People don't merely play music and listen to music on their own. Traditionally, music was made in company, danced to in company, sung together, and so on. It was quintessentially a social occasion. And this has changed in recent years because of the invention of the, first of all, the gramophone, the tape recorder, and the iPod, and all the things that you young people are familiar with. For you, you can have music at any time of the day just by putting the earphones into your ears and turning on your little machine and selecting perhaps from a choice of 20 million songs, the last one that you heard, which you've become addicted to. Is that a good thing or not is a very important question. But one natural consequence that it will have is that you don't need to make music in order to hear it. So the impulse, the need to make music, to learn a musical instrument or learn how to sing is much less strong in your generation than it was in mine. My generation was one in which the gramophone was beginning to dominate the house, but hadn't quite succeeded in driving out the upright piano. And so if one wanted music in my youth, one had to make it. And that was, of course, a very important feature of our education, because it led us automatically into doing other things with other people. What was wonderful, if you could play any musical instrument, was to join with others who did the same. Indeed, when I was young, this was the early days of the rhythm and blues movement, which developed into the Beatles and so on, long before any of the young people here were born, in which we all wanted to imitate that peculiar sound and did our best to make a version of it, because it wasn't easily available in any other way. So we make judgments about a lot of things. Music is one of them, and music is now omnipresent. I'm staying in this hotel, And of course, the first thing that I encountered on coming down in the morning was music of an utterly detestable kind to me, which made it impossible for me to have my breakfast. But for most people, this ambient music is an important part of the digestive system. So inevitably I felt somewhat alienated from my surroundings. But it brought home to me again the great question of how you do distinguish the good from the bad in this area, whether we should try to distinguish at all. Now, we have many different interests in our lives. Some things we judge to be good absolutely when we judge them. Others we judge to be good merely as a means. In other words, merely useful. We are surrounded by useful things, but good things, things which maybe have no particular use for us, but we just want to be in the presence of, those are rare. We have to work for them, and we have to try to achieve them. In the case of music, it's very difficult to formulate the idea that some music is good in itself and is understood not simply because it might be useful. After all, what is the use of music? Many people faced with that question, like the managers of this hotel, have a clear answer. The use of music in this hotel is the same as its use in a milking parlour on a cattle farm. You know, it keeps the animals calm, and that means they won't complain about the rubbish they're given to eat at breakfast. And there is plenty of such uses of music, which again you find not only in hotels but all over the world in which we are now, in airports, places where human beings are briefly trapped between one bus and the next, and their senses assaulted with the kind of rubbish that will stop them from complaining, except the few like me who complain about the rubbish. It's impossible to go into a restaurant now without finding the same noise in the background, which is judged to be useful for the purposes that the restaurant owner has, namely to keep these people more or less entertained in their seats, to cure them for the embarrassment that they would otherwise feel at not having a word to say to their neighbours, and in general to fill in the vacuum that is constantly there stalking us through modern life. But is that the right use of music? Many people would say, well, look, that's not the only use. Of course, we all have our own music, the music that we particularly love, which is what we put in our ears when we have a moment to ourselves, and that is the stuff which really entertains us. The word entertainment is an interesting word. You don't find it much in the English language before the 20th century, and when you do find it, it's usually as a term of abuse. Now, however, entertainment is a thing that we're all expected to pursue and have a need for. Entertainment involves having fun. It involves being distracted from the affairs of everyday life. It involves relaxing, taking time off, being out of the strain and the stress of actually working or producing something. In the past, people have never thought of music in that way. It wasn't part of having fun or relaxing. Well, perhaps it was part of relaxing, but it wasn't a time off from life. It was a part of life. It was something that you encountered. You enjoyed it, of course, but you also listened to it, and maybe you joined in and made your own contribution to it. Then, of course, the question of judgment arises. Which kind of music should you join in, and which should you not? If you look back over the history of our societies, you'll recognize that music has had a very important role in all kinds of very serious activities. In church, obviously, in the Christian tradition, worship involves not only singing, but chanting, and the application of music, often in choirs or even in orchestras, to making intelligible and articulate the sacred words. It's had a very important part in the concert. Concerts, in at least of serious music, are occasions when you sit and listen to something, And in listening, you are yourself still. You're silent for perhaps a whole 2 hours, just trying to take in this thing which is not part of you, but coming to you from outside, with messages which you often find very difficult to understand, but you know that they are serious. In these kind of contexts, judgment obviously enters very much as part of the deal. You're not going to do this, sit for 2 hours listening to something if you think it's rubbish. It's only when you think of music as a mere distraction or entertainment that judgment seems not to matter. So those of us who like serious music have been brought up with the idea that judgment is entirely a part of it, and that we distinguish not just the good and the bad, but the inspiring and the sentimental, the cheesy and the distracting, and so on. Now, in the Old Testament, which many of you, I'm sure, still are taught in one way or another, you will remember the story at the beginning of the book of Genesis, which gives an account of the creation of the world. This is obviously, as we know from modern physics, is not how the world actually did begin, but it's a kind of allegory as to how we should understand the beginning of the world if we are to live in it as we should. And God, having gone through various acts of creation, which lasting 6 days, on the seventh day, took a day of rest, which became, of course, celebrated in the Jewish Sabbath. And on that day, he stood back from his work and looked on it and said to himself, "It is good." And the Hebrew word that he used means not only good, but also beautiful. That this is something which, as it were, it is not only good to have made, but also consoling and inspiring now to contemplate. And that is a kind of archetype of something that we all feel every now and then in this life, when we perhaps have achieved something and stand back to observe it and say, yes, that was a good thing to do, and it's a good thing to contemplate when done. And many of the most important experiences we have through contemplating things, as when we just sit transfixed by a beautiful sunset, or a beautiful landscape, or a beautiful painting, or listening to a beautiful work of music, or, as in Dr. Mullins's example, looking into the eyes of a fellow human being. That is a well-known, extraordinary experience, because we, unlike the other animals, we don't just look at each other's eyes, we look into them. And this is an extraordinary thing. Nobody knows quite how to describe the difference between those two. Your dog looks at your eyes because he knows that that's the best indication of what you're next going to do. But your mother or your lover looks into your eyes because he or she is in search of what you really are, that thing that hardly ever reveals itself except in these moments of intimate encounter. So looking into the eyes of another is something which seems to convey to us the meaning of what they are. You know, what you are for me, and why you are important, why you are a thing of value, a thing that's irreplaceable. And just the same way, when we are listening to a work of serious music, we have that sense of listening in to a fellow soul, a soul that's been transcribed in sound and demands us just to sit there, exploring it, but also being content with it being there in front of us. Now, the question is, this is what I would call the Sabbath attitude, the attitude that God had towards his creation when he stood back from it and saw the point of it. And it's an attitude that we have when we stand back from our lives and see the point of them. And music is part of that, of one of the occasions when we can do this. But this brings me to the question of pop music. Pop music obviously has a slightly different significance from the serious music of the concert hall, which you just sit and listen to, and or the music of the church service, which you might participate in, but which is an act of worship rather than hearing. It has a lot to do with dancing, and the important thing about dancing, of course, is rhythm. I want to give you an example. I've got a lot of examples on this, but I have to find them. Where are we? This is a piece. I won't play you all of it because you'll soon see why. Which might have been sounding from behind that devil's mask that Dr. Mullins just showed you, and it's called "Second to Sun" by a death metal group called Atheist. So here it goes. Oh no. Something's gone wrong. Well, something I'm afraid has gone wrong with my computer. I have to... why have I got this? How do I get off that? Something is the wrong thing up there. I want to get onto this.
That one there?
Yeah. Yeah, let's just press that. Yep. No, it's not going. There it goes. Right. Now most adults in the room would say of that that it's extremely sinister. But of course, the words which you didn't hear confirm the impression. The words say, second to sun, like Jupiter, we are the ones. All atoms report to the sun, we are the ones. It goes on repeating this, claiming that life has really fallen apart. All we are is atoms, and the only thing that we have to worship is the sun now. I think most musicians in this room will recognize that the person playing the drums there was a real musician. You know, you don't get that kind of technique just by being hitting a stick on a piece of parchment. It's something which you have to learn. So there's a lot of technique in it, but at the same time, there is a kind of aggression towards the world, an aggression which actually prevents the group itself from singing. They croak out the words as though with their last breath, and they can't actually make themselves heard over their own noise. But nevertheless, this has a following, this kind of music, and there's a real question as to why. You can't dance to it. And one of the interesting things is that people do try to dance to metal. They end up bashing each other's heads or pushing into each other, throwing each other around. They don't dance with each other, they dance at each other, like boxers in a ring. And that contrast, I'll see if I can get a proper piece of dancing so that you can... I don't trust this computer anymore, I'm afraid. Where have we got to? Here you go. Let's see if that will go. There you go. Right, now, I can tell you that you were brought up on the iPod, because when music comes on, you talk to each other instead of listening to it. For you, music is in the background. That, as you may know, is a Scottish reel, and it expresses in its very rhythm and harmonies the idea of dancing with the music rather than at something. You join in, and of course the dances that kind of music is designed for, that's an 8-some reel, they're dances which involve formations, 16 people in a ring who change partner all the time. So it's of no great erotic significance. Even if you enter the dance with the girl that you really want, you'll end up dancing with her grandmother. This is a wonderful discipline for young people when they're forced to recognize that dancing is something that all of us need and is a genuine social activity which can be detached from our erotic ambitions. Now, in all this, there is a real question of how one begins to judge. We know that some kind of popular music is bound to be in our vicinity, and we're bound to, our younger members are bound to need it. They need to dance, or they need to move to things, because that's part not only of growing up and understanding your own body, but it's also part of you relating to other people. You relate to a great extent through your movements, and one of the purposes of dancing is to overcome the embarrassment of being a merely physical thing. In a proper dance, you can dance with the other without embarrassment, and that is something which people, I think, long for, and one of the things that pop music, to a certain extent, has jeopardized. And one of the reasons for this is that rhythm is not the same thing as a mechanical beat. And that is a strong point, of course, of heavy metal, which it makes that very clear. You can't produce that kind of sound that Atheist, the band called Atheist, just produced by plugging in a rhythm machine. That piece sometimes has only 18 and a half beats in the bar, or 21 beats in the bar. It's constantly fighting against itself, giving you a sense of this captured life, which can't break out of the prison that it's made for itself. But it isn't rhythm either. And I'll give you an example of real rhythm in pop music, which I think is a lesson that we should take to heart, because this is rhythm created by a human voice, without backing, without a rhythm machine or anything like that, but a rhythm which is then taken up by the little band of instrumentalists that go with it. This is Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley, which you may very well know. It says my computer is not authorized to play it. Oh dear. Let's try this one.
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street, that Heartbreak Hotel. I'll be just so lonely, baby. Well, I'm so lonely. I'll be just so lonely, I could die. Although it's always crowded, you still can find some room for broken-hearted lovers to cry there in the gloom. Be so.
Right, so that is the very opposite of a mechanized sound, isn't it? It's the human voice used to create a rhythm, starting on an offbeat, going through all kinds of broken rhythms before the double bass comes in and equalizes everything on 4 and a bar. There is a rhythm that's created out of the life of a human being. And it doesn't have to be a voice either. I'll give you another example. This is from early days of pop music, obviously. This is Lay Down Sally by Eric Clapton, where the acoustic guitar is used in the same way. There you are, and then the electric backing comes in. You see that there the rhythm is created musically and melodically before any backing comes in to emphasize it. And it's as though already the rhythm has been, as it were, touched by human life. I think there is a kind of judgment that one can make just at the pure level of rhythm. Is this rhythm taking us in a mechanical direction towards something which is merely repetitive, or is it expressing another life, a life which is interesting in itself, from which we can perhaps gain something? A lot of modern pop, of course, relies entirely on the either a synthesized background or even a rhythm machine, which dispenses altogether with this idea that we create rhythm through our own movements. Again, we can say something about melodies too. In the classical tradition, melody was the all-important part of music, the thing that you learn to sing or to play, which has a kind of form and order in itself, which is a picture of the human soul. In much modern pop music, melody has disappeared. There's no melody, of course, in that piece of death metal, because there was no... all there was for the voice to do was to croak. But in the place of that, we have a new kind of way of getting by without melody, which is singing on one note. I'll give you an example. This is the Kooks in Ular.
In their eyes, it's the place that you found. You discover that you love it here. You've got to stay on this rock, an island on which you found a love it. Then you twitch, you feel like it.
Anyway, you could see that, and it goes on forever. And in case you think that's an unusual one, I think this is a much more popular and better known one, Poker Face by Lady Gaga. With a synthesized background.
Hold them like they do in Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. I love it. Love game, intuition, play the cards with spades to start. And after he's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on his heart.
There you are. Well, there was a brief moment when she found another note, but it was only it only lasted for a bar. Right, so I could give a lot more of the examples of this, but what I really want to talk about is how you begin to judge this kind of thing and why. When we move in a mechanical way to a machine which is just generating that thump, thump, thump in the background, our bodies move likewise. Even if we're not moving physically, we're, as it were, moving incipiently. Something is going on in us which wants to move with it. And I think for that reason, we have to be careful about the kind of things that we move with. There's a great difference, and this has already been mentioned by Dr. Mullins, between addictive practices and ones which, in which there's an exercise of choice. In every area, we make a distinction between the things that we choose to do and which express our freedom and our willing participation in things, and the things which we are compelled to do or which overcome our will, so to speak, and drag us into some kind of mechanistic activity that we don't really want but can't resist. And we know that addictions form in this way, and addiction is not just a medical condition. It is a spiritual condition. It is what essentially is being warned against in so much traditional morality, which is it's warning us against falling into habits in which we're not ourselves the sovereign, so to speak, not ourselves in control, but ourselves victims of forces that we neither understand nor can resist. And I think a lot of modern pop music is designed to produce that kind of addictive response, so that you need it. You actually need it in the background. That's the point of the music at breakfast in this hotel. It's thought, at least by the management, to answer to an addictive need. If you don't provide it, these guys are going to be without their necessary injection of whatever it is. And of course, I think most of us would recognize that when addiction takes over a certain area, it doesn't just abolish your freedom, it abolishes your ability to make serious and creative relations with others. And we know that from not just from alcohol addiction and drug addiction and so on, but obviously much more threatening to young people today, pornography addiction and so on, which is undermines people's ability to relate directly and properly to the person whom they finally choose as the one who will save them from this. You know, that there is something rather, in a way, sort of pathetic about the situation in which young people now find themselves when it comes to the choice of their beloved when it's finally made. And that is something which we, all of us, especially of the older generation, are aware of, that young people have to go through a period between, 15 and 22 or 23 or whatever, where addiction lies all around them, and they can fall into the habit of it, or they can resist it. And by resisting it, they open themselves not only to their own freedom, but to the freedom of others, and to the formation of relationships which are rewarding. And I think we find that reflected in music. That was the purpose of my examples. I took examples from the world of pop music. Didn't want to contrast it with, obviously, with the world of classical music, where all that is in any case put on one side. But nevertheless, even within the world of pop music, which is all important because you need to dance and to move with things just like everybody else, even within that world, we can make judgments. We can dismiss things as cheesy or mechanical or in the case of the death metal thing, as sinister. You know, we can say that there are moral virtues and moral vices expressed even in this music, and we must habituate ourselves to listening for them and understanding which things we should imitate and which things we should not. And I think that is something which people are very reluctant to do. And I just want to conclude by saying why. We don't find it difficult to make judgments in certain areas, you know, in a court of law or whatever, or when you're wondering whether it was right or not to steal your best friend's bicycle because it was better than yours. In the end, you're quite clear that you know how to make judgments about that. But when it comes to things like people's taste in music or art or architecture or whatever, people these days are reluctant to make judgments. They don't think, first of all, they don't think it matters quite so much, and secondly, they don't know how to make the judgment. And thirdly, they think that if they do make a judgment, they are in some way offending people. That it's offensive to hear from someone like me that your taste in music is total crap. And yet, it isn't offensive if it's said in the right tone, and if I invite you to answer back and say, no, I like this stuff and this is why, and you're wrong in your taste. If you can enter a debate like that and start giving reasons for and against, it shows that you're already standing back from it and reflecting on it and asking yourself the question, what is this doing to me? Is there a better way of responding to music and a better way of enjoying what music has to offer? And I think that's, for that reason, we do need to make these judgments, and we need to resist this thought that it's offensive to make them. It isn't offensive. In the end, it's much more offensive to say that everybody should just do what they want because it doesn't matter. But that's a way of dismissing the mass of mankind as unimportant to you. If you think people are really valuable and important, then you want to share your tastes and your joys with them, and you want them to understand just why it is that you think that something is important. So there, in a way, we have to fight against this idea that it's offensive to judge others' taste. And I think once we realise that it isn't offensive but actually a compliment, then we will get on with the business and our students and we ourselves will be, I think, much improved by this. Thank you.